What's going on, Summoners? It's that time of the week again. We got a new patch with a ton of new changes, and I know you guys want to hear more. My name is Kangas, and in this video, we'll be going over all the changes for patch 11.2, and also provide you with updated tier lists for all 5 roles. But before we get into it, I gotta mention, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to hit that sub button. We love making these videos for you guys, and doing that will help us out a ton. Now, let's jump into the new patch because, man, I am ready for some changes after that first one. Like always, it's not a patch rundown if we don't talk about the most important part for competitive integrity, the skins. You'll be able to find Ruined Draven, Ruined Karma, and Ruined Shyvana in the shop. With Viego joining Summoner's Rift, it's only appropriate that the Ruined King brings some followers with him, right? We've also got some new skins under the Shan High Scrolls collection, and they're going to be for Cho'Gath, Jhin, Nautilus, and Neeko. Of course, every skin will be a hit or miss based on personal preference. However, I am going to tell you that even if you don't like how they look, the particles and changes to abilities for some of them, like Neeko, definitely look amazing. So take note of these releases because they are some high quality skins. Next up, let's run through the balance changes. So starting off with systems, we got plenty of necessary changes to items. Let's start by talking about Hextech Rocket Belt. Even after a nerf, the item is still proving to be too powerful. Rather than touching stats or damage, the movement speed bonus from the active has been reduced this patch. Rather than providing 50% for 2 seconds, it now only provides 30% for 1.5. While we want assassins to be able to do what they're designed to, which is burst down enemies and finish off low health ones, Hextech Rocket Belt provides some unnecessary power elsewhere. For one, it allows players to get away with being a little less precise than they usually need to be. The extra movement speed means that even if they can't successfully one-shot a carry, they can still run them down and finish off their targets if they get close enough from their initial attempt. The item's just been too strong and therefore got nerfed this patch. Following buffs, Gale Force has become a common purchase on several marksmen. Seen in player inventories a bit too often, Riot has decided to revert its cooldown back to 90 seconds now that players have given the item a chance and understand its uses. Will the item stop being purchased and return to its former state, or will the initial spike in popularity be enough to give the player base an idea of how strong this item actually is? We'll have to wait to see what happens as the patch rolls out. Another mythic item that's been nerfed is one that I've built a lot, Imperial Mandate. Rather than just touching numbers, the item has actually gotten some nerfs to its functionality. Rather than applying its per target cooldown off of its activation, it now starts the moment you apply crowd control onto a target. This means that if you don't have an ally nearby, you'll end up wasting the cooldown. As a result, solo laners are going to be significantly weaker, and even supports will have to be more careful when using it. So if your teammates don't act on your crowd control, it has lost some damage, but in most cases, the item will remain about the same. So yes, I will continue abusing Maokai support. You can't stop me. Kraken Slayer has also been due a nerf. Certain builds just took advantage of its passive far too well, and now we'll see some fall-offs on certain abilities like Katarina's ultimate, Urgot's W, and Aphelios' Q. We've also got some big changes to tank items this patch. First up is Turbo Chem Tank. The cost has been reduced from 3,200 to 2,800, and now builds out of a Null Magic Mantle instead of a Negatron Cloak. Its ability haste has been increased by 5, MR reduced by 25, and the Mythic passive will now provide ability haste rather than tenacity and slow resist. One particular champion we think will benefit from this the most is Cho'Gath. Now that the bonus stat is ability haste, many more tank champions can benefit from this item. We might even see more tank supports build it because of the lower price. Ultimately, I think this change is actually a buff. Even though the stats were lowered, it now costs much less so you can get it much quicker, and it provides a more flexible bonus stat as well. This will definitely be the go-to mythic for the Swifties Deadman plate rushing supports. Frostfire Gauntlet received very similar changes this patch. The cost has also been reduced to 2,800, will now build out of cloth armor instead of chain vest, its ability haste increased from 15 to 20, and the armor reduced from 50 to 25. While it provides far less armor now, it's cheaper and also provides more ability haste than it did before. As a result, the item is probably going to just feel stronger, and players should be able to pick up either of these two items instead of Sunfire Aegis to adapt to specific games or just their own playstyle preferences. We got plenty more exciting changes this patch, which leads me to our question of the day. What upcoming changes are you most looking forward to? Personally, I love that Rammus is getting a rework to make him viable in higher elo as well. I might even have to try him out as a support, but let me know your answers in the comments down below. Now let's get back to the video. Another tank item that's been changed, Gargoyle's Stone Plate, has actually been buffed. Its bonus resistance passives were increased from 3% to 5%, meaning that it'll cap out at 25%. That's 10% more than before, and without a doubt, this item will definitely serve its purpose of bulking up any champion and turning them into a tanky titan. Next up, Essence Reaver has also been changed. Instead of restoring 3% max mana, it now restores 40% of the damage dealt from Spellblade before damage reduction. For most champions, this is a sizable buff, and will lead to an increase in their mana regen. Alright, it's finally time to talk about that big ol' elephant in the room. Sunfire Aegis has been nothing short of overpowered for the entirety of preseason, as well as the first batch of Season 11. Balancing out this item in particular and putting the other tank mythic items on an equal footing has been a major goal of this patch, and it honestly looks like Riot may have actually hit the mark this time. Rather than providing ability haste, Sunfire Aegis will now provide slow resistance and tenacity. It'll no longer be that single stop you need to make to access every stat a tank wants to carry games. Instead, it's lost a little bit of damage and replaced it with utility. Typically, a tank's damage scales with cooldowns rather than ability ratios, and Sunfire Aegis was turning frontliners into duelists that could pick fights and practically kill anyone that they wanted. So this change was needed. Now, there is work being done on non-tank items as well. Phantom Dancer and Rune Hurricane have received a small change this patch. The cost has been increased from 2500 to 2600, and the attack speed from 40 to 45% for both items. Although subjective, this is essentially an early game nerf and a late game buff. You'll have to take a little bit longer to complete the item, but get some more stats out of it, right? 100 gold and 5% attack speed are both very small changes, so you probably won't even notice this change all that much. Umbro Glaive has also received some changes, as the cost was reduced from 2800 to 2600, the AD from 55 to 50, and will now build out of 2 longswords instead of a Caulfield's Warhammer. Now cheaper, assassins or champions utilizing lethality builds should be able to finish this item faster and hit mid-game power spikes when they matter most. 5 AD loss hurts the late game, but you're usually picking 80 assassins to make sure that you don't get to that point to begin with, so I'm fine with this change. The cheaper cost should more than compensate and makes this change favorable for most assassin players. And yes, I do think it's viable on Pantheon support. Watch out for it, guys. Serpent's Fang received identical changes, and its cost has been reduced to 2600 and its AD lowered by 5 as well. Chempunk Chainsword is next on the list, as its cost was reduced from 2700 to 2600, and its health lowered from 200 to 150. Again, some stats are lost, but the overall build for assassins is looking a lot cheaper than before. Finally, Shirelia's battle song has gotten a big change this patch. The health was lowered from 350 to 200, the movement speed removed and replaced with 40 AP, and its base mana regen increased from 50 to 100%. It also now builds out a Kindle Gem and Bandle Glass Mirror. This makes the item much more appealing towards the majority of enchanters. Bonus movement speed wasn't a necessary stat when you were typically playing far into the backline anyway. At times you got caught, you were probably dead regardless, and replacing it with AP should help make it a more appealing alternative to Moonstone Renewer or Imperial Mandate. Now, let's talk about champion changes, beginning with the top lane. Like we said, there is too much healing in this game. If you don't agree, I'm sorry, you're wrong. That's why Aatrox has been nerfed this patch. His E has been changed to become stronger during his ultimate, increasing the heal to 26 to 50% based on ability level. But in compensation, his R's healing amplification has also been lowered from 50 to 100% to 30 to 60%. What this really means is that Aatrox's healing from his E will actually be a little bit stronger than before. But in contrast, outside healing sources like Gore Drinker are going to provide far less. Considering that the new items are what brought Aatrox back to the forefront of the meta to begin with, there's no doubt that this is going to be a noticeable nerf. We'll still leave Aatrox in the S tier for now because of how powerful his laning is, but I'm personally expecting that to change. Meanwhile, Darius was also nerfed this patch. After terrorizing solo queue for years now, Riot has finally decided to give him the nerf that he deserves. Darius's passive bonus AD has been decreased from 30 to 230 to 20 to 205. 10 less AD early is a very big nerf, but again, it always comes down to whether or not Darius can actually get 5 stacks or not. He's still gonna hurt, as he should, if he manages to take those long and extended fights against you. We think he'll still be OP, but perhaps this will create more space for potential counter picks. While his win rate will probably drop this patch, we think that given enough time, it'll drop even more as players experiment and figure out what works against him after the change. We do have a couple changes to mention to our tier list, however. For one matter, we've dropped Malphite down from the OP into the S tier, and also we moved Cho'Gath up there as well. These changes are in response to what's happened to mythic items this patch. Sunfire Aegis was one of the main reasons why Malphite became so AP this season. He once had juicy immolate burn damage, and he also wants ability haste. Sunfire Aegis gives both, but now will give a lot less ability haste than before. Although players can instead build Turbo Chem Tank, Malphite will end up a bit weaker than before if he chooses to do so. I mean, he's just gonna do less damage no matter what now. Even if you still build Sunfire Aegis, you're missing out on a ton of ability haste later into the game, and this change will definitely be noticeable. On the other hand, Cho'Gath is going to be much stronger this patch. Cho'Gath's biggest issue as a tank is getting in. This is why we saw Righteous Glory purchase on him so much in previous seasons. Turbo Chem Tank is basically just Righteous Glory but better, because it comes with an immolate effect. Now that Chem Tank is the source of ability haste, you can bet that Cho'Gath players are going to be really happy this patch. You have an item that fixes your biggest weakness, makes you tankier, and also lowers your cooldowns. Watch out everybody, because Cho'Gath was already killing it, and he's only getting stronger now. So, our OP picks in the top lane are Pantheon and Darius, followed up by Malphite, Aatrox, Shen, Wukong, Camille, Maokai, Garen, Poppy, and Cho'Gath in the S tier. Next up, let's run through the jungle. So, let's talk about Olaf. I don't care if your dad owns a dealership, man, you're getting nerfed. Just like Aatrox, building Gore Drinker makes this champion way too busted. The healing inability to constantly survive at 1 HP is just too much for most players to deal with. When you think you're able to finish him off, he just manages to hold on for dear life, and before you know it, you've got a gray screen and Olaf is full health again. Olaf's W lifesteal has also been increased from 14 to 22% to 16 to 24%, but his W healing amplification was reduced from 0 to 50 to 0 to 33% based on missing health. He'll heal more from his W, but outside sources will heal for less. There's definitely other factors contributing to Olaf being OP currently, because he's got high damage output as well as a ridiculous clear speed, so we're not fully ready to move him out of the OP tier just yet. He ended last patch at a 54% win rate in high elo, so we think there's a good chance he'll still be OP even after this nerf. Nunu was also nerfed this patch. His movement speed was reduced by 5 and his base HP lowered from 580 to 540. These are actually pretty harsh nerfs, and I expect that especially in high elo, we'll see Nunu's win rate drop a bit. A bit easier to kill and much slower now, aggressively counterpicking Nunu and hunting him down should be a much more viable option than before. So we'll move Nunu down from the OP tier this patch into the S tier. Another one of the top junglers, Elise, has been nerfed as well. Her Spider Form's Q damage has been lowered from 70 to 230 to 70 to 210. A minor nerf to her mid and late game, Elise will be a bit weaker than before. However, she's been popping off recently, and in spite of this nerf, we think she needs to be placed a bit higher. Don't get me wrong, Elise has been popping off everywhere, but in Korean solo queue specifically, she's one of the most valued junglers in the game. With a lower ban rate than many of the other OP junglers, she ends up being one of the most popular picks because she just manages to make it through the ban phase with relative ease. We've placed her in the OP tier for this patch. Ivern has also gotten a small nerf this patch. His E's AP ratio has been lowered from 90% to 80%. Overall, this buff will make him a bit weaker, but we're still keeping him in the S tier for now because of how small it is. And keep in mind, he's still stronger than he initially was during the preseason just because of how cheap support mythics are. Another change we'll mention is that Dr. Mundo has gotten a well-needed buff. His QHP refund on hit was increased from 40 to 50% and refund on kill from 80 to 100%. His ease cost has been reduced from 25 to 65 to 20 to 60, the damage on it increased from 3 to 5% to 4 to 6% max HP, and our healing increased from 50 to 100 to 50 to 110% max HP. Really what this means is it should be a lot less risky picking Mundo now, as he'll remain healthier at all points of the game. Of course, he'll also heal more from his ultimate in the late game and also deal more damage because of that nice buff to his E. Unsurprisingly, the changes to Sunfire Aegis might actually help Mundo out a lot. His cooldowns are already very short, so ability haste is not a must on him. Instead, the increased slow resist and tenacity can help Mundo go where he pleases with as few stops as possible. Thus, we've moved Mundo up to the B tier this patch. The troll in the jungle, Trundle, got a buff this patch as well. His Q bonus damage ratio was increased from 10 to 50% to 15 to 55% of his total AD, while his W's attack speed went from 20 to 100 to 30 to 110%. In response to tanks being quite powerful, Trundle is getting some buffs to keep them in check. These buffs don't seem significant enough to really move him up a tier, however, and he'll stay where he is for now. The poor guy has just been suffering since the preseason, and things aren't looking good for him on 11.2 either. And here's a sentence I never thought they would pay me enough to say: Shaco has been also underperforming. As a result, he got buffs this patch as well. Ugh. His passive's backstab damage was increased from 10 to 25 to 20 to 35. 10 damage early is quite nice, and remember that this damage can even crit, so even in the late game, it's a noticeable buff. Shaco snowballs extremely hard, and if this extra damage secures a takedown early, it'll definitely be enough to make Shaco a strong pick once again. We'll leave Shaco in the B tier for now, but there's a chance that he'll push into the A tier, so make sure to keep your eyes out for the mid-patch update next week. Nocturne is next on the list for buffs. His Q's cooldown was reduced from 10 to 8 seconds, while his R's cooldown was lowered from 150 to 100 to 140 to 90 seconds. These are a very nice buff, and the reduced cooldowns are a great way to compensate for the fact that ability haste in Season 11 is much weaker than cooldown reduction from past seasons. This buff is a very big one, and will move Nocturne up to the B tier as a result. Finally, Viego is set to release this patch. If you want more information about him, we actually have videos about him that you can check out on our channel. Since he's new, we'll list him as unranked and give you guys an update next week. One last change we've made is that we've moved Gragas up into the B tier. Turbo Chem Tank is going to be a very good purchase on him because of that ability haste. We might even see Tank Gragas make its way back, or at least become a solid option once again. Even without this change, Gragas has recently started doing pretty well building full AP and just going for fast one-shots on enemies. In the jungle, our OP picks are Olaf, Graves, Kha'Zix, and Elise, followed by Evelynn, Rammus, Echo, Hecarim, Kayn, Talia, Nunu, Ivern, Fiddlesticks, and Karthus in the S tier. That'll wrap up jungle, so let's talk about mid lane next. Kicking off the mid lane, Akali has been nerfed. Her ban rates have been incredibly high for the past few months now. Using Night Harvester, Akali is even more nimble than before, and the fact that she can just spam her Q now leads to a ton of frustration when playing against her. Akali's Q energy cost has been increased from 120 to 80 to 120 to 100. As a result, she'll need to make more use of her passive consistently if she plans on spamming her Q as much as possible. We think Akali will finally drop down from the S tier into the A tier, but will retain a high ban rate because she's just hell to play against. Now, we've got a buff for Leblanc to talk about. Her health per level was increased from 92 to 97, while her Q's mana cost reduced from 50 to 90 to 50 to 70. Considering how minor these buffs are, we'll leave Leblanc comfortably where she is in the A tier. Azir also got a buff this patch. With how powerful assassins are, Azir has very little breathing room to work with right now. In comparison, there are plenty of other scaling champions, like Anivia, who just feel so much more worthwhile. Nonetheless, this is about him and not the other scaling mids. His Q's cooldown was lowered from 15 to 7 to 14 to 6 seconds, which will really help out both his early and late games. That's a very short cooldown in a late game, and if you're ever able to hit that point in a game, you'll definitely be able to hard carry with Azir. However, because of how long it takes for Azir to come online and have noticeable impact, he still remains a pretty risky pick. So we've left him in the C tier for now. Finally, we got a small change for Zoe. It's season 11 now, so she's getting her W updated to include new drops. The minion spell drop should now include Randuin's Omen, Locket of the Iron Solari, Turbo Chem Tank, Shirelia's Battle Song, Yomu's Ghostblade, Gore Drinker, Stridebreaker, and Prowler's Claw. The biggest part about this change is that it actually now excludes Redemption. And on top of that, there's also been a bug fix. When you cast a spell from a shard of an item you already own, it won't put the item in your inventory on cooldown. This is more of an update than a buff or nerf, so we'll leave her in the B tier for now. But do note that she's incredibly powerful in high elo. We do want to note that AD assassins are probably going to spike a bit faster than before. We'll hold off on our mid-patch update to make any adjustments to their placements though. They're all pretty high up on the list regardless, so you can expect them to remain pretty strong this patch. Now for our OP picks, we've got Echo, Pantheon, Anivia, and Fizz, followed by Zed, Victor, Annie, Katarina, Galio, Malphite, Yone, Yasuo, Seraphine, and Kiana in the S tier. While Kraken Slayer did get that nerf, Katarina will remain in the S tier because she was doing fine with other builds even before on-hit items became popular. Regardless, old AP Katarina running Electrocute still gets the job done. And thank God she can't build tank anymore. There aren't too many mid lane changes this patch, so that'll actually wrap it up. Let's talk about bot lane next. So to start off, the bot lane features some much needed buffs. First off, we've got one for Caitlyn. Caitlyn's AD per level has been increased from 2.88 to 3.3. She's actually been underperforming this season, and this buff should give her what every marksman desires most: more damage. Giving her base damage buffs would just make her broken again, so instead, Riot has targeted her scaling. Caitlyn's mid and late game are strong, but not as strong as many other champions, and a little extra AD probably won't change that entirely. It's still a buff though, and we'll keep her in the A tier for now. Varus, on the other hand, has been begging for buffs. His mana per level was increased from 33 to 40, while his R's cooldown reduced from 120 to 60 to 100 to 60. The mana buff won't be a big change, but his ultimate being on a 20-second lower cooldown early on is huge. You'll be able to go for a couple more plays in the early to mid game now. We don't think this buff will be enough to push him out of the C tier just yet, but once people realize how good he is around Dragon now, and after another buff, he'll be ready. Zenna has also felt pretty weak, and as a result, she's got buffs too. They're also pretty big. Her attack speed ratio was increased from 0.2 to 0.3, her non-kill ghoul spawn chance increased from 22 to 28%, gold from ghouls increased from 3 to 8, and her Q's healing ratios increased from 40% AD and 25% AP to 50% AD and 40% AP. While these buffs are clearly targeted towards support Zenna, both carry and support players benefit from this set of buffs. We've moved her up to the B tier as a result. She's got more damage, better attack speed scaling, more gold, and a higher drop rate on those ghouls. Just trust me, this is a big one. Still waiting for some bigger buffs and nerfs in the future, but at least this is a start for bot laners. We've got Jhin, Misfortune, and Kai'Sa as our OP picks, followed up by Samira, Ashe, and Vayne in the S tier. That's it for the bot lane, so let's wrap things up with my favorite role, supports. Just looking at win rates, you can already guess which support champions got nerfed this patch. The recent return of Maokai support has created quite a mess for a lot of players and a lot of fun for my elo. He might be fun to play, but he is understandably pretty oppressive to play against. For several patches now, he's been one of the best supports in the game, and this patch, Riot has finally decided to do something about it. His mana cost has gone up from 60 to 80 to 60 to 100, and the AP ratio was reduced from 1% per 100 AP to 0.8% per 100 AP. When we look at the solo lanes, tank Maokai is practically untouched by this nerf. Even for support Maokai, these nerfs actually aren't the biggest, and I think he'll still remain as an S tier pick at worst. We think he's still really powerful because of his high damage output and crowd control, so we'll leave him in the OP tier for now. There's a chance that this change plus the Imperial Mandate one will drop him down, but it just doesn't feel like it's going to be that different. Cannot say the same for Soraka, however, and that's exactly why she got a buff instead this patch. On 11.2, her Q's health restore was increased from 50 to 90 to 50 to 110, while her W's heal was raised from 80 to 220 plus 60% AP to 90 to 230 plus 70% AP. Battlesong got that AP stat changed, so maybe it's time for us support mains to do some experimenting. A 70% ratio on her heal is just insane, and maybe throwing in a Mejai's Soul Stealer isn't actually a bad idea in games where you start off strong. The current state of supports is that you either try to one-shot somebody, or you can prevent you and your teammate from getting one-shot. So as a result, Soraka has had a tough time finding her place in the meta. Her allies get killed too fast, or she herself gets killed too fast, and therefore she's not able to provide as much value as she'd like during games. While this is a decent-sized buff, we're still going to leave Soraka in the C tier just for now because of how the meta currently looks. There's just too much hard engage and too many assassins. We don't have any other changes to note just yet, but I definitely expect some new potential builds to come out this patch. Turbo Chem Tank being much cheaper means that more players are probably going to try it out on champions who are great at roaming. We've seen Leonas and Alistairs all over the place, even Rel, and I think this item slots in well for them. With those changes covered, our OP support picks remain the same from our mid-patch update. We've got Leona, Lulu, Thresh, and Maokai in the OP tier, followed by Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Alistar, Brand, Nautilus, and Seraphine in the S tier. And that'll wrap up our patch 11.2 rundown. Thanks so much for watching, and I'd also like you guys to go check out ProGuides.com if you haven't already. We got even more content there that'll help you level up your game. I wish you the best of luck this patch, and as always, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.